Alright, welcome back to Skyrim Scholar Survival. So we're kind of in a reading mode at the moment. Just getting done oh, and also hello bunny, hi. We are kind of staving off with some reading, mainly because as soon as we go to sleep, we're going to be taken by the Dark Brotherhood. Because we know. So now, I'm going to do some additional reading. I have some books in my possession. I just want to get them out of the way. And also, I'll drop them off here in that chest back there we just saw. And then we shall... Let's see. Is it the Wolf Queen or just Wolf Queen? The Wolf Queen, Volume 1. There we go. One. This is another one of the dude who... It's by the same author. The Tales of... whatever his name is. The broker, or what, the landman. The Wolf Queen, Book 1, by Joachim Yarth. From the pen of the 1st century 3rd era sage Montokai, 3rd era 63. In the autumn tide of the year, Prince Plagueis, son of Prince Uriel, who is son of Empress Kintyra, who is niece of the great Emperor Tiber Septim, came to the high rock city-state of Camlorn to pay court to the daughter of King Volstade. Her name was Quintilla, the most beauteous princess in Tamriel, skilled at all the maidenly skills and an accomplished sorceress, 11 years a widower with a young son named Antiochus. Plagueis arrived at court to find that the city-state was being terrorized by a great demon werewolf. Instead of wooing, Plagueis and Quintilla together went out to save the kingdom. With his sword and her sorcery, the beast was slain, and by her powers of mysticism, Quintilla chained the beast's soul to a gem. Plagueis had the gem made into a ring and married her. Oh, that was not probably a good decision. But it is said that the soul of the wolf stayed with the couple until the birth of their first child. 3rd era 80. The ambassador from Solitude has arrived, your majesty, whispered the steward Balbus. Right in the middle of dinner, muttered the emperor weakly. Tell him to wait. No, father, it's important that you see him, said Plagueis, rising. You can't make him wait and then give him bad news. It's undiplomatic. Don't go, then. You're much better at diplomacy than I am. We should have all the family here, Emperor Uriel II added, suddenly aware how few people were present at his dinner table. Where's your mother? Sleeping with the archpriest of Kinnereth, Plagueis would have said, but he was, as his father said, diplomatic. Instead he said, at prayer. And your brother and sister? Amiel is in first hold meeting with the Archmaester of the Mages Guild, and Galana, though we wouldn't be telling this to the ambassador, of course, is preparing for her wedding to the Duke of Narcissus. Since the ambassador expects her to be marrying his patron, the King of Solitude, instead, we'll tell him that she's at the spa, having a cluster of pestilent boils removed. Tell him that, and he won't press too hard for the marriage, politically expedient though it may be. Plagueis smiled. You know how queasy Nords are about warty women. But dash it, I feel like I should have some family around, so I don't look like some old fool despised by his nearest and dearest, growled the Emperor, correctly suspecting this to be the case. What about your wife? Where's she and the grandchildren? Quintilla's in the nursery with Sepphoris and Magnus. Antiochus is probably whoring around the city. I don't know where Potema is, probably at her studies. I thought you didn't like children around. I do during meetings with ambassadors in damp staterooms, sighed the Emperor. They lend an air of, I don't know how, innocence and civility. Ah, show the blasted ambassador in, he said to Balbus. Potema was bored. It was the rainy season in the imperial province, wintertide, and the cities and the gardens of the city were all flooded. She could not remember a time where it was not raining. Had it been only days, or had it been weeks or months since the sun shone? There was no judging of time any more in the constant flickering torchlight of the palace, and as Potema walked through marble and stone hallways, listening to the pelting of the rain, she could think nothing but that she was bored. Asthefe, her tutor, would be looking for her now. Ordinarily she did not mind studying. Rote memorization came easily to her. She quizzed herself as she walked down through the empty ballroom. When did the Orsinium fall? First era, 980. Who wrote Tamrielin Tractates? Kiosi. When was Tiber Septim born? Second era, 288. Who is the current king of Daggerfall? Mortine, son of Gothler. Mortim, son of Gothler. Who is the current Sylvanar? Farbarenthi, son of Farbaril. Who is the warlord of Lilmoth? Trick question. That's a lady. Eoa. What will I get if I'm good, a girl, and don't get into any trouble, and my tutor says I'm an excellent student? Mother and father will renege on their promise to buy me a Daedric katana of my own, saying they never remembered that promise, and it's far too expensive and dangerous for a girl my age. There were voices coming from the Emperor's stateroom. Her father, her grandfather, and a man with a strange accent, Nord. Potema moved a stone she had loosened behind a tapestry and listened in. Let us be frank, your Imperial Majesty, came the Nord's voice. My sire, the King of Solitude, doesn't care if Princess Galana looks like an orc. He wants an alliance with the Imperial family, and you agreed to give him Galana, or give back the millions of gold he gave to you to quell the Khajiit rebellion in Torval. This was the agreement you swore to honor. I remember no such agreement, came her father's voice. Can you, my liege? There was a mumbling noise that Potema took to be her grandfather, the ancient emperor. Perhaps we should take a walk to the Hall of Records. My mind may be going. The Nord's voice sounded sarcastic. I distinctly remember your seal being placed on the agreement before it was locked away. Of course, I may verily be mistaken. We will send a page to the hall to get the document you refer to, replied her father's voice, with the cruel, soothing quality he used whenever he was about to break a promise. Potema knew it well. She replaced the loose stone and hurried out of the ballroom. She knew how slowly the pages walked, used to running errands for the doddering emperor. She could make it to the Hall of Records in no time at all. The massive ebony door was locked, of course, but she knew what to do. A year ago she caught her mother's Bosmer maid pilfering some jewelry. In exchange for her silence, forced the young woman to teach her how to pick locks. Potema pulled 2 pins off her red diamond brooch and slid the first into the first lock, holding her hand steady and memorizing the pattern of the tumblers and grooves within the mechanism. Each lock had a geometry of its own. The lock to the kitchen lauder, 6 free tumblers, a frozen 7th, at a counterbolt. She had broken into that just for fun, but if she had been a prisoner, the whole imperial household would be dead by now, she thought, smiling. The lock to her brother Antiochus' Antiochus's secret stash of Khajiit pornography. Just two free. Oh, our brother's a furry. No. Just two free tumblers and a pathetic poisoned quill trap easily dismantled with the pressure on the counterweight. That had been a profitable score. It was strange that Antiochus, who seemed to have no shame, proved so easy to blackmail. She was, after all, only 12, and the differences between the perversions of the cat people and the perversions of the Cyrodiils seemed pretty academic. Still, Antiochus had given her the diamond brooch, which she treasured. She had never been caught, not when she broke into the Archmage's study and stole his oldest spellbook, not when she broke into the guest room of the King of Ghislaine and stole his crown the morning before Magnus's official welcoming ceremony. It had become too easy to torment her family with these little crimes, but here was a document the Emperor wanted for a very important meeting. She would get it first. But this was the hardest lock she had ever opened. Over and over she massaged the tumblers, gently pushing aside the forked clamp that snatched at her pins, drumming the counterweights. It nearly took her a half a minute to break through the door to the Hall of Records, where the Elder Scrolls were housed. The documents were well organized by year, province, and kingdom, and it took Potema only a short while to find the promise of marriage between Uriel Septim II, by the grace of the gods, Emperor of the Holy Cyrodiilic Empire of Tamriel, and his daughter, the Princess Galana, and His Majesty King Mantiarco of Solitude. She grabbed her prize and was out of the hall with the door well locked before the page was even in sight. Back at the ballroom, she loosened the stone and listened eagerly to the conversation within. For a few minutes the three men, the Nord, the Emperor, and her father, just spoke of the wealth and some boring diplomatic details. Then there was a sound of footsteps and a young voice, the page. "Your Imperial Majesty, I have searched the Hall of Records, and I cannot find the document you asked for." "There, you see," came Potema's father's voice. "I told you it didn't exist." "But I saw it!" The Nord's voice was furious. "I was there when my liege and the Emperor signed it. I was there." "I hope you aren't doubting the word of my father, the sovereign emperor of all Tamriel, not when there's now proof that you must have been mistaken." Plagueis' voice was low, dangerous. "Of course not," said the Nord, conceding quickly. "But what am I to tell my king? He is to have no connection with the imperial family, and no gold returned to him as the agreement, I believe the agreement to be. We don't want any bad feelings between the kingdom of Solitude and us," came the Emperor's voice, rather feebly but clear enough. "What if we offered King Mantiarco our granddaughter instead?" Potema felt the chill of the room descend on her. "The Princess Potema? She is not too young?" asked the Nord. "She is 13 years old," said her father. "That's old enough to wed. She would an ideal mate for your king," said the Emperor. "She is, admittedly, from what I have seen of her, very shy and innocent, but I'm certain she would quickly grasp the ways of court. She is, after all, a septim. I think she would be an excellent Queen of Solitude, not too exciting, but noble. The granddaughter of the Emperor is not as close as his daughter," said the Nord, rather miserably, "but I don't see how we can refuse the offer. I will send word to my king." "You have our leave," said the Emperor, and Potema heard the sound of the Nord leaving the stateroom. Tears streamed down Potema's eyes. She knew who the King of Solitude was from her studies. Mantiarco, 62 years old and quite fat, and she knew how far Solitude was, and how cold in the northernmost clime. Her father and grandfather were abandoning her to the barbaric Nords. The voices in the room continued talking. "Well acted, my boy. Now, make sure you burn that document," said her father. "My prince?" asked the page's querulous voice. "The agreement between the Emperor and the King of Solitude, you fool. We don't want its existence known. "Why, Prince, I told the truth. I couldn't find the document in the Hall of Records. It seems to be missing." "By Lorca! By Lorcan," roared her father, "why is everything in this palace always misplaced? Go back to the hall and keep searching until you find it." Botema looked at the document. Millions of gold pieces promised to the King of Solitude in the event of Princess Galena not marrying the king. She could bring it to her father, and perhaps as a reward he would not marry her to Mantiarco, or perhaps not. She could blackmail her father and the emperor with it, and make a tidy sum of money. Or she could produce it when she became Queen of Solitude to fill her coffers and buy anything she wanted, more than a Daedric katana. Then that was for certain. So many possibilities, Botema thought, and she found herself not bored anymore. Excited to see where that goes. Alright, I think that's all the books in here, except for that one, but we can't read that yet because that's part 4. But I do have in my collection, I picked up a couple books. Alright, I already read that one, you can drop that. The Beggar Prince. Let's do that one. Beggar Prince, the story of Weedle and his gifts from the Daedric Lord Nemira. We look down upon the beggars of the Empire. These lost souls are the poor and wretched of the land. Every city has its beggars. Most are so poor that they have only the clothes on their backs. They eat the scraps the rest of us throw out. We toss them a coin so that we don't have to think too long about their plight. Imagine my surprise when I heard the tale of the Beggar Prince. I could not imagine what a prince of beggars would be. Here is the tale I heard. It takes place in the First Age, when gods walked like men and Daedra stalked the wildernesses with impunity. It is a time before they were all confined to oblivion. There once was a man named Weedle. Or maybe it was a woman. The story goes to great lengths to avoid declaring Weedle's gender. Weedle was the 13th child of the king of Valenwood. As such, Weedle was in no position to take the throne or even inherit much property or wealth. Weedle had left the palace to find independent fortune and glory. After many days of endless forest roads and tiny villages, Weedle came upon a 3-men surrounding a beggar. The beggar was swaddled in rags from head to toe. No portion of the vagabond's body was visible. The men were intent on slaying the beggar. With a cry of rage and indignation, Weedle charged the men with the sword drawn. Being simple townsfolk armed only with pitchforks and scythes, they immediately fled from the armored figure with the shining sword. "Many thanks for saving me," wheezed the beggar, from behind the heap of foul rags. Weedle could barely stand the stench. "What is your name, wretch?" Weedle asked. "I am Nemira." Unlike the townsfolk, Weedle was well learned. That name meant nothing to them, but to Weedle it was an opportunity. "You are the Daedric Lord," Weedle exclaimed. "Why did you allow those men to harass you? You could have slain them all with a whisper." "I am pleased you recognize me," Nemira rasped. "I am frequently reviled by townsfolk. It pleases me to be recognized for my attribute, if not for my name." Weedle knew that Nemira was the Daedric Lord of all things gross and repulsive. Diseases such as leprosy and gangrene were her domain. Where others might have seen danger, Weedle saw opportunity. "O great Nemira, let me apprentice myself to you. I ask only that you grant me powers to make my fortune and forge a name for myself that will live through the ages. Nay, I make my way alone in the world. I have no need for an apprentice." Nemira shambled off down the road. Weedle would not be put off. With a bound, Weedle was at Nemira's heel, pressing the case for an apprenticeship. For 33 days and nights, Weedle kept up the debate. Nemira said nothing, but Weedle's voice was ceaseless. Finally, on the 33rd day, Weedle was too hoarse to talk. Nemira looked back on the suddenly silent figure. Weedle knelt in the mud at her feet, open hands raised in supplication. "It would seem you have completed your apprenticeship to me after all," the mirror declared. "I shall grant your request." Weedle was overjoyed. "I grant you the power of disease. You may choose to be afflicted with any disease you choose, changing them at will, so long as it has visible symptoms. However, you must always bear at least one. I grant you the power of pity. You may evoke pity in anyone that sees you. Finally, I grant you the power of disregard. You may cause others to disregard your presence." Weedle was aghast. These were not boons from which a fortune could be made. They were curses, each awful in its own right, but together they were unthinkable. How am I to make my fortune and forge a name for myself with these terrible gifts? "As you begged at my feet for 33 days and 33 nights, so shall you now beg for your fortune in the cities of men. Your name will become legendary among the beggars of Tamriel. The story of Weedle, the prince of beggars, shall be handed down throughout the ages." And as the mirror predicted, Weedle was an irresistible beggar. None could see the wretch without desperately wanting to toss a coin at the huddled form. However, Weedle also discovered that the power of disregard gave great access to the secrets of the realms. People unknowingly said important things where Weedle could hear them. Weedle grew to know the comings and goings of every citizen in the city. To this day it is said that if you really want to know something, go ask the beggars. They have eyes and ears throughout the cities. They know all the little secrets of the daily lives of its citizens. Uh-huh. Let's get this ready so I can just drop them in this chest. Come back for them later if I need to. Now we got breathing water. Breathing Water by Hallie Myrne. He walked through the dry, crooked streets of Balfell, glad to be among so many strangers. In the wharfs of Vivec, he had no anonymity. They knew him to be a smuggler, but here he could be anyone. A lower class peddler, perhaps, a student even. Some people even pushed against him as he walked past, as if to say, "We would not dream of being so rude as to acknowledge that you don't even belong here." Serene Rayless was not in any of the taverns, but he knew she was somewhere, perhaps behind a tenement window or poking around in a dunghill for an exotic ingredient for some spell or another. He knew little of the ways of the sorceresses, but that they always seemed to be doing something eccentric. Because of this prejudice, he nearly passed by the old Dunmer woman having a drink from a well. It was too prosaic, but he knew from the look of her she was Serene Rayless, the great sorceress. "I have coin for you," he said to her back, "if you will teach me the secret of breathing water." She turned around, a wide, wet grin stretching across her weathered features. "I ain't breathing it, boy. I'm just having a drink." "Don't mock me," he said stiffly. "Either you're Serene Rayless, or you will teach me the spell of breathing water, or you aren't. Those are the only possibilities. If you're going to learn to breathe water, you're going to have to learn there are more possibilities than that, boy. The school of alteration is all about possibilities, changing patterns, making things be what they could be. Maybe I ain't Serene Rayless, but I can teach how to breathe water." She wiped her mouth dry. "Or maybe I am Serene Rayless and I won't. Or maybe even I can teach you to breathe water, but you can't learn." "I'll learn," he said simply. "Why don't you just buy yourself a spell of water breathing or a potion over at the Mages Guild?" she asked. "That's how it's generally done." "They're not powerful enough," he said. "I need to be underwater for a long time." I'm willing to pay whatever you ask, but I don't want any questions. I was told you could teach me. What's your name, boy? That's a question, he replied. His name was Tharian Winloth, but in Vivek they called him the Toll Man. His job, such as it was collecting a percentage of the loot from the smugglers when they came into the harbor to bring to his boss in Kamanatong. Of the value of that percentage, he earned another percentage. In the end, it was very small indeed. He had scarcely any gold of his own, and what he had he gave to Rain Ralis. The lessons began that very day. The sorceress brought her pupil, who she simply called Boy, out to a low sandbank along the sea. I will teach you a powerful spell for breathing water, she said, but you must become master of it. As with any spells and all skills, the more you practice, the better you get. Even that ain't enough. You achieve true mastery. You must understand what it is you're doing. It ain't simply enough to perform a perfect thrust of a blade. You must also know what you are doing and why. That's common sense, said Tharian. Yes, it is, said Serene, closing her eyes, but the spells of alteration are all about uncommon sense. The infinite possibilities, breaking the sky, swallowing space, dancing with time, setting ice on fire, believing that the unreal may become real. You must learn the rules of the cosmos and then break them. That sounds very difficult, replied Tharian, trying to keep a straight face. Serene pointed to the small silver fish darting along the water's edge. They don't find it so. They breathe water just fine. But that's not magic. What I'm saying to you, boy, is that it is. For several weeks, Serene drilled her student, and the more he understood about what he was doing, and the more he practiced, the longer he could breathe underwater. When he found that he could cast the spell for as long as he needed, he thanked the sorceress and bade her farewell. There is one last lesson I have to teach you, she said. You must learn that desire is not enough. The world will end your spell no matter how good you are, and no matter how much you want it. That's a lesson I'm happy not to learn, he said, and left at once for the short journey back to Vivek. The wharfs were much the same, with all the same smells, the same sounds, the same characters. His boss had found a new toll man. He learned from his mates. They were still looking out for the smuggler ship Morodrung, but they had given up hope of ever seeing it. Thirain knew they would not. He had seen it sink from the wharf a long time ago. On a moonless night he cast his spell and dove into the thrashing purple waves. He kept his mind on the world of possibilities, that books could sing, that green was blue, that water was air, and that every stroke and kick brought him closer to a sunken ship filled with treasure. He felt magic surge all around him as he pushed his way deeper down. Ahead he saw a ghostly shadow of the Moradung, its mass billowing in a wind of deep water currents. He also felt his spell begin to fade. He could break reality long enough to breathe water all the way back up to the surface, but not enough to reach the ship. The next night he dove again, and this time the spell was stronger. He could see the vessel in detail, clouded over and dusted in sediment. The wound in its hull, where it had struck the reef, a glint of gold beckoned from within, but still he felt reality closing in, and he had to surface. The third night he made it to the steerage, past the bloated corpses of the sailors, nibbled and picked apart by fish, their glassy eyes bulging, their mouths stretched open. Had they known the spell, he thought briefly, but his mind was more occupied by the gold scattered along the floor, the boxes that contained them, shattered. He considered scooping as much as he could carry into his pockets, but a sturdy iron box seemed to seek more treasure. On the wall was a row of keys. He took each down and tried to open the lock box, but none opened it. One key, however, was missing. Tharian Thalion looked around the room. Where could it be? His eyes went to the corpse of one of the sailors floating in a dance of death not far from the box, his hands tightly clutching something. It was a key. When the ship had begun to sink, the sailor had evidently gone for the iron box. Whatever was in it had to be very valuable. Thalion took the sailor's key and opened the box. It was filled with broken glass. He rummaged around until he felt something solid and pulled out 2 flasks of some kind of wine. He smiled as he considered the foolishness of the poor alcoholic. This was what was important to the sailor. Out of all the treasure in the Moradung. Then, suddenly, Thalion felt reality. He had not been paying attention to the grim, tireless advance of the world on a spell. It was fading away his ability to breathe water. There was no time to surface. There was no time to do anything, as he sucked in his lungs filled with cold, briny water. A few days later, the smugglers working on the dwarf came upon the drowned body of the former tollman. Finding a body in the water of effect was not in itself noteworthy, but the subject that they discussed over many bottles of Flynn was how did it happen that he drowned with 2 potions of water breathing in his hands. Thank you for having that on the last turn page. That was good. Oh man. Yeah, wouldn't it have been more prudent? You just go, oh, that guy was an idiot. He's like, dude, you could have just bought a whole bunch of potions of water breathing. And then if it felt when you were wearing it off, you just chug another one. Can you drink underwater? I think you can. Oh boy. Alright. What else do I got? Nords Arise by Anonymous. Okay. Nords arise, throw off the shackles of imperial oppression, do not bow to the yoke of a false emperor, be true to your blood, to your homeland. The Empire tells us we cannot worship holy Talos. How can man set aside a god? How can a true Nord of Skyrim cast aside the god that rose from our own heartland? Mighty Tiber Septim, himself the first emperor, conqueror of all Tamriel, ascended to godhood to sit at the right hand of Akatosh. Tiber Septim, a true son of Skyrim, born in the land of snow and blood, bred to the honor of our people, is now Talos, god of might and honor. The Empire has no right to tell us we cannot worship him. Our own High King, Torug, betrayed us to the Empire. He traded our god for peace. He agreed to a pact with the Thalmor signed by an emperor in a foreign land. Are we to behold to such a pact? No, 1,000 times no. Do not let the lessons of history go unheeded. The Aldemiri Dominion and its Thalmor masters made war upon men, just as the elves made war upon Ysgramor and our people in ancient times. Shining Sarthal was burned to the ground, reduced to ruins and rubble in their treacherous assault. But Ysgramor and his sons gathered the 500 companions and made war upon the elves, casting them out of Skyrim. In the Great War fought by our fathers, the elves again betrayed men by attacking us unprovoked. The Dominion and the Thalmor cannot be trusted. Like Ysgramor, Ulfric Stormcloak is a true hero of Skyrim. His name will ring in Sovngarde for generations to come. Only he had the courage to single out King Thorig and challenge him to trial by arms. Ulfric's doom, a gift from Talos himself, struck down this traitorous ruler, and by his death we are now free of our imperial shackles and the Thalmor overlords that darkened the imperial throne. The Empire has sent its legions to govern us. They have enlisted our own countrymen to our cause. They have set brother against brother, father against son. They have caused Skyrim to battle itself in their name, for their cause. Do not let them divide us. Do not let them conquer us. Reject the imperial law that forbids the worship of Talos. Join Ulfric Stormcloak and his cause. Alright, pretty good. I do wonder just who I would choose. Like, I think, like, I don't like the whole racism that's on the Nord side, but I do get the thing where there is of the Empire, there is, they have their own, like, racism, like, against men, which is on what the Thalmor are, kind of thinking. And it's like, come on, let people worship what they want. It is the whole allusion to kind of in real life what we went through with the Roman Empire coming in to the British Celtics, was it? I think I'm a little hazy on that. Alright, I think I read this one already. Yes, I read this one already, but I don't think I knocked it off, so marked it off my thing here. Yeah. Just make sure I have that marked off. And now we have of cross daggers. Of Cross Daggers, The History of Riften by Dwenon Windell. Situated on the eastern banks of Lake Honrick, the city of Riften serves as a reminder of a bygone era. The once proud streets and buildings have vanished and been replaced with a collection of wooden structures and rough stonework shrouded in a permanent fog-like mist. In order to understand how such a large city became nothing more than a glorified fortress, one need only look to the history books for answers. Riften was a major hub of activity for trade caravans and travelers to and from Morrowind. Fishing skiffs could be seen dotting the lake at all hours of the day, and the bustling city was alive with activity at night. The city guard was formidable and maintained a tight grasp on the populace, keeping them safe from harm. The marketplace in Riften was also quite a draw, containing numerous stands offering wares from across Tamriel. In 4th Era 98, amidst the confusion of the Void Knights, Hosgun Cross Daggers was installed as Jarl when the previous Jarl had been assassinated. Although many believed that Hosgun was responsible and cries of protest filled the streets of Riften, the Jarl took the throne and immediately took action to protect his station. Using the city guard, he had the streets cleared of protesters and initiated a curfew. Any caught breaking the curfew was immediately jailed without process or executed if it was a repeat offense. Over 40 years, Hosgun ruled Riften with a black heart and an iron fist. He imposed ridiculous taxes upon his subjects and any merchants that wished to sell their wares within the city walls. Hosgun kept most of the coin for himself, using it to construct a massive wooden castle with unnecessarily lavish quarterings within. The castle took 7 years to build and became a visible reminder of the people's obsession which earned it the nickname Hosgun's Folly. Towards the end of his reign, the streets of Riften became littered with refuse, and its people plagued by disease and hunger. Then, in 4th Era 129, the people had finally had enough. With their numbers, they were able to temporarily overwhelm the city guard, long enough to set Hosgun's Folly on fire, with the greedy Jarl still within. As the fighting recommenced, the fire spread through the city unchecked. By the morning, the people had emerged victorious, but not without great cost. Most of the city was now in ruins, and many had died. It took 5 years to rebuild Riften into the smaller city it is today. And even though over 50 years has passed since then, it still has yet to fully recover. Some believe it will never achieve the level of affluence it saw at the beginning of the 4th Era, but there are a few who still hold out to hope that the Riften can return from the ashes and become a center of commerce once again. Yeah, that's a shame. And then we have this one, Song of Hrorim. Hrormer. Song of Hrormer. Herm. Oh, these things. Of Hermer. I'm just gonna call it Song of Hermer. I'll do my best. Why is my health so low? I need to heal. Song of Hermer. Hermer, Song of Hrorgar, summoned to the court of Vizdak, son of Vjinmor, king of Evensnow. Mighty caster of magic, I charge thee to go to Alfendor, for its hoary warriors do threaten my land, and give forth their cousin demons to terrify my people. Hormir, son of Hrorgar, heard the words of Shindak Evensnow. By ice staff, surely I would help thee, but I have already a quest to drink 12 flagons of mead in 1 hour, and then bed 4 wenches, twice each, so I must with grace decline. The king he did not smile, as Hrormir in his jolly spirit. By thine honour must thou aidest my cause, for must thou takest up the sword of thy companion Darfang, who took the quest and failed. Hormir laughed. Now I know thou jest. My boon mate Darfang wouldst not fail? There be no finer bladesman. If thou chargest them, he wouldst not fall. I did not say he fell. He joined the dark kings of Alfendor, and by doing so dishonored himself and thee, his friend. Hormir could not believe the words, and yet he knew even Eversnow didst not lie. So for 20 days and 3 rodeth he to the land of night, the kingdom of fear, where the peasants ever carried candles, knowing what evil awaiteth them, should they stray beyond the glow. The sovereignty of 3 dark kings, Alfendor. There, torch in hand, didst Hormir pass through haunted countryside and frightened villages, and through the black gates of the blacker castle of Alfendor. The 3 dark kings did sneer at the sight of mighty Hormir, and summoned their champion, Darfang the Blade. My boon companion, Hormir called in the hall of night. I dare not trust my eyes, for then I wouldst believe that thou hast joined with evil, and turned thy way from honor and brotherhood. Hormir, Darfang the Blade didst cry, if thou dost not go now, one of us must die, for I hate thee. But Hormir was battle ready, and in the echoing halls of night, the blade of Darfang and the staff of Hormir did strike against, and yet again, mighty warriors and mages both, the boon of champions now foes, shook Mundus with their war. They might have fought for a year, if they were sun in Alfendor to mark time, and either Hormir or Darfang may verily have won, but Hormir saweth through the dark, the tears in the eyes of his former friend, and then he saw the shadow of Darfang, were't not his own, and so with ice staff he did strike not Darfang but his shadow, which cried, Hold, mortal man! The shadow becameth a hag, bent and twisted in her cloak and hood. From her faceless shadows she hissed, Mortal man, called Hormir, the soul of thy boon companion is my plaything, but I will take thine in trade, for though thee both have strong arms, thou hast the more clever mind, which my sons of the dark kings need, for a champion of Alfendor. Hormir the bravest did not take a breath, nor pause before he boldly said, Shadowy hag, release Darfang, and thou mayest use me as thou will. The hag didst laugh and free Darfang. To save thine honor, this thou hast done, but now thou must be without honor. Mortal man, as the champion of the dark kings, my heirs of grey may be, thou must help them divide Alfindor, and love me, thy shadow hag, and thy mistress well. For his loss of honor and his dear friend's sacrifice, noble Darfong prepared to take his dagger and plunge it in his good heart, but Hormir stayed his brother's hand and whispered, "No, boon champion, wait for me at the village banquet hall." And then did Darfong the blade leave the castle, while Hormir took the withered claw of the hag and pressed it to his lips. "Shadowy hag, to thee I pledge to only honor thy black words, to turn my back on truth, to aid thy dark king's ambition, to divide their inheritance fairly, to love thee, to think thee beautiful." And then to the chamber in the heart of night Hormir and the hag did retire. Kissed he there her wrinkled lips, and her wrinkled okay, sag and rest. For 10 days and nights did he, and 3 did Hormir and his ice staff rattle thus. Then sweet Kinnereth blew honeyed winds o'er the hills and forest glens of Alfindor, and the caress of warm, bloodied Dibella coaxed the blossoms to wanton display, so that Alfindor became a garden of all the senses. The frightened servants of the Dark Kings woke to find there was naught to fear, and through the once dark streets of the village came the cries of celebration. In the banquet hall of the village, Hormir and his boon champion Darfong embraced and drank of rich mead. The shadowy hag was too smiling, sleeping still in her soft bed, until the morning sun touched her naked face, and she awoke and saw all, and knew all saw her, and she cried out, "Mortal man!" The night fell fast upon the land, as the hag flew into the banquet hall, casting blackest darkness in her wake. But all the celebrants still could see her anger in her monstrous face, and they shook with fear. The hag had said the kingdom was to be divided among her heirs, but Alfindor had been kept whole, while her children divided, drawn and quartered. Hormir was mightily amused. He swallowed his laughter in his mead, for none should laugh outright at the Daedra Lord Nocturnal, without her grey cowl of shadowy night. Her hideous face forced the moons to hide themselves. Hormir the mighty did not quail. "Where'st be thine hood, shadowy hag? Mortal man, hast taken it from me unaware. When I awoke, my face unmasked, my kingdom cast into the light, my dark king heirs in pieces cast, and here my champion smiles, yet in truth thou kept thy promise truly, to never keep thy promise true." Hormir, son of Horregar, bowed to the hag his queen. "And evermore, till thou releaseth me, will I serve thee so. A clever mind in a champion is a much overvalued trait." The hag released Hormir's soul, and he released her hood, and so in the light of darkest dark left Alfindor evermore. And after drinking 12 flagons of mead, and bedding 4 wenches, twice each, did Darfong return to Eversnow with Hormir, son of Horgar. Okay. I gotta cut. What's my time at? Okay, that's 4. I got 3 more books. Plus this one, but I'm gonna keep that for later. 4 more books. The Art of War Magic. Okay. The Art of War Magic by Zurin Arctus, with commentary by other learned masters. Chapter 3. Dispositions, Master Arctus said. For 1. The moment to prepare your offense is the moment the enemy becomes vulnerable to attack. Leros Chal. Knowledge of the enemy mage's mind is of the foremost importance. Once you know his mind, you will know his weaknesses. Sedmar, Master Arcus, advised Tiber Septim before the Battle of Five Bridges not to commit his reserves until the enemy was victorious. Tiber Septim said, "If the enemy is already victorious, what use committing the reserve?" To which Master Arctus replied, "Only in victory will the enemy be vulnerable to defeat." Tiber Septim went on to rout an enemy army twice the size of his. 2. The enemy's vulnerability may be his strongest point. Your weaknesses may enable you to strike the decisive blow. Marandro Ur. In the wars between the Nords and the Chimer, the Nord shamans invariably use their mastery of the winds to call down storms before battle to confuse and dismay the Chimer warriors. One day, a clever Chimer sorcerer conjured up an ice demon and commanded him to hide in the rocks near the rear of the Chimer army. When the Nords called down storms as usual, the Chimer warriors began to waver, but the ice demon rose up as the storm struck, and the Chimer turned in fear from what they believed was a Nord demon and charged into the enemy line, less afraid of the storm than of the demon. The Nords, expecting the Chimer to flee as usual, were caught off guard when the Chimer attacked out of the midst of the storm. The Chimer were victorious that day. 3. When planning a campaign, take account of both the arcane and the mundane. The skillful battle mage ensures that they are in balance. A weight lifted by one hand is heavier than 2 weights lifted by both hands. 4. When the arcane and mundane are in balance, the army will move effortlessly, like a swinging door on well-oiled hinges. When they are out of balance, the army will be like a 3-legged dog, with one leg always dragging in the dust. Thus, when the army strikes a blow, it will be like a thunderclap out of a cloudless sky. The best victories are those unforeseen by the enemy, but obvious to everyone afterwards. 6. The skillful battle mage ensures that the enemy is already defeated before the battle begins. A close-fought battle is to be avoided. The fortunes of war may turn aside the most powerful sorcery, and courage may undo the best laid plans. Instead, win your victory ahead of time. When the enemy knows that he is defeated before the battle begins, you may not need to fight. 7. Victory in battle is only the least kind of victory. Victory without battle is the acme of skill. 8. Conserving your power is another key to victory. Putting forth your strength to win a battle is no demonstration of skill. This is what we call tactics, the least form of the art of war magic. Thulenden dir Thrarkun. By tactics, Master Arctus includes all the common battle magics. These are only the first steps in understanding of war magic. Any hedge mage can burn up his enemies with fire. Destroying the enemy is the last resort of the skillful battle mage. 9. The battle is only a leaf on the tree. If a leaf falls, does the tree die? But when a branch is lopped off, the tree is weakened. When the trunk is girdled, the tree is doomed. 10. If you plan your dispositions well, your victories will seem easy, and you will win no acclaim. If you plan your dispositions poorly, your victories will seem difficult, and your fame will be widespread. Marandro Soul. Those commonly believed to be the greatest practitioners of war magic are almost always those with the least skill. The true masters are not known to the multitude. Okay. I didn't understand a lick of what was said there, but okay. Okay. The Lunar Lorcan. Pardon me. The Lunar Lorcan by Faldrune. I will not go into the varying accounts of what happened at Adamantine Tower, nor will I relate the war of manifest metaphors that rendered those stories unable to support most qualities of what is commonly known as narrative. We all have our favorite Lorcan story, and our favorite Lorcan motivation for the creation of Nirn, and our favorite story of what happened to his heart. But the theory of the Lunar Lorcan is of special note. In short, the moons were and are the two halves of Lorcan's flesh divinity. Like the rest of the gods, Lorcan was a planet that participated in the Great Construction, except where the eight lent portions of their heavenly bodies to create the mortal planet. Lorcan's was cracked asunder, and his divine spark fell to Nirn as a shooting star to impregnate it with the measure of its existence and a reasonable amount of selfishness. Mazer and Secunda, therefore, are the personifications of the dichotomy, the cloven duality, according to Artaeum, that Lorcan legends often rail against. Ideas of the anima animus, good, evil, being, nothingness, the poetry of the body, throat, and moan silence as the abortive, and so on, set in the night sky as Lorcan's constant reminder to his mortal issue of their duty. Followers of this theory hold that all other heart stories are mythical degradations of the true origin of the moons, and it needn't be said that they observe the hollow crescent theories as well. So the theory is that Lorcan is actually the moons. That's a good one. The marksmanship lesson. Making good headway with our list. Well, there's a lot. The Marksmanship Lesson by Alan Laleth. Camerel Brine had very definite opinions on how things should be done. Every slave he bought on the day he bought him or her was soundly whipped in the courtyard for a period of 1 to 3 hours, depending on the individual degree of independent spirit. The whip he used, or had his castellan use, was of wet, knotted cloth, which regularly drew blood, but very seldom maimed. So, his great satisfaction and personal pride, few slaves ever needed to be whipped more than once. The memory of their first day and the sight and sound of every subsequent slave's first day stayed with them throughout their lives. When Brine bought his first Bosmer slave, he ordered his castellan to whip him only for an hour. The creature, which Brine had named Daub, seemed so much more delicate than the Argonians and Khajiiti and the Orcs, who made up the bulk of the slaves. Daub was clearly ill-suited for work in the mines or in the fields, but he seemed presentable enough for domestic service. Daub did his work quietly and tolerably well. Brine occasionally had to correct him by refusing him food, but punishment never needed to go further. Whenever guests arrived at the plantation, that's one of these stories, huh? Come on. Come on, Daub. It's not your real name, but come on. Whenever guests arrived at the plantation, the sight of the exotic and elegant addition to Brine's house staff always impressed them. "Here, you," said Ganethane Iliok, a minor but still noble member of the house Induril, as Daub presented her with a glass of wine. "Were you born a slave?" "No, Sedura," Daub answered with a bow. "I used to rob nice ladies like you on the road." The company all laughed with delight, but Calmeril Brine checked with the slave trader from whom he had bought Dob and found that the story was true. The Bosmer had been a highwayman, though not one of any great notoriety, before he had been caught and sold into slavery as punishment. It seemed so extraordinary that a quiet fellow like Dob, who always looked respectfully downward at the sight of his superiors, could have been a criminal. Brine made up his mind to question him about it. "You must have used some sort of weapon when you were robbing all those pilgrims and merchants." Brine grinned as he watched Dob mop. "Yes, Sidura," Dob replied humbly, "a bow. Of course. You Bosmiri are supposed to be very handy with those." Brine thought a moment and then asked, "A bit of a marksman, were you?" Dob nodded humbly. "You will tutor my son, Waldillic, in archery," the master said after another moment's pause. Waldillic was 12 years of age and had been rather sadly spoiled by his mother, Brine's late wife. The boy was useless at swordplay, fearful of being cut. He embarrassed his father's pride, but the personality defects seemed ideally suited to the bow. Brine had his castellan purchase a finely wrought bow, several quivers of arrows, and ordered targets to be set up in the wildflower field next to the plantation house. A few days' time, the lessons began. For the first few days, the master watched Waldillic and Dob to be certain that the slave knew how to teach. He was pleased to see the boy learn the grips and different stances. Business concerns, however, had to take precedent. Brine only had time to see to it that the lessons were continuing, but not how well they were progressing. It was a month's time before the issue was re-examined. Brine and his castellan were reviewing the plantation's earnings and expenses, and they had come to the area of miscellaneous household costs. "You might also check to see how many targets in the field need to be repaired." "I have already anticipated that, Sidura," said the castellan. "They are in pristine condition." "How is that possible?" Brine shook his head. "I've seen targets fall apart after only a few good shots. There shouldn't be anything left after a month's worth of lessons." "There are no holes in any kind of any kind in the targets, Sidura. See for yourself." As it happened at that hour, the marksmanship lesson was under way. Brine walked across the field, watching Dob guide Waldillic's arm as the boy took aim at the sky. The arrow flew up into an arch, over the top of the target, burying itself in the ground. Brine examined the target and found it to be, as his castellan said, in pristine condition. No arrow had touched it. "Master Waldillic, you must put your right arm down further," Dob was saying, "and the follow-through is essential if you expect your arrow to gain any height." "Height?" Brine snarled. "What about accuracy? Unless he's been secretly racking up a high kill ratio on birds, you haven't taught my son a thing about marksmanship." Dob bowed humbly. "Sidura, my first master Waldillic must become comfortable with the weapon before he need worry about accuracy. In Valenwood we learn by watching the bolt arch at different levels, in different winds, before we try very hard to strike targets." Brine's face turned purple with fury. "I'm not a fool. I should have known not to trust a slave with my boy's education." The master grabbed Dob and shoved him toward the plantation house. Dob, head down, began the humble shuffling walk he had learned in his domestic duties. Waldillic, tears streaming down his face, tried to follow. "You stay and practice," roared his father. "Try aiming at the target itself, not the sky. You are not coming back into the house until there is one hole in that damned bull's-eye." The boys tearfully returned to practice. When Brine brought Dob into the courtyard and called for his whip, Dob suddenly broke away and scrambled to hide between some barrels in the center of the yard. "Take your punishment, slave. I should have never shown you mercy the day I bought you," Brine bellowed, bringing the whip down on Dob's exposed back again and again. "I have to toughen you up there'll be no more soft jobs as tutor and valet in your future. Woldillick's plaintive yell drifted in from the window. I can't, father, I can't hit it. Master Woldillick, Dob cried as loud as he could, his voice shaking with pain. Keep your left arm straight and aim slightly east. The wind has changed. Stop confusing my son, Brian screamed. You'll be in the Saltric fields if I don't beat you to death first, like you deserve. Dob, the boy wailed, far away. I still can't hit it. Master Woldillick, take 4 steps back, aim east, and don't be afraid of the height. Dob tore away from the barrels, hiding under a cart near the wall. Brian pursued him, raining down blows. The boy's arrow sailed high over the target and kept climbing, reaching a pinnacle at the edge of the plantation house before coming down in a magnificent arch. Brian tasted the blood before he realized he'd been hit. Gingerly, he raised his hands and felt the arrow protruding out of the back of his neck. He looked at Dob crouching under the wagon and thought he saw a thin smile cross the slave's lips. Just for an instant before he died, Brian saw the face of the rogue highwayman on Dob. Bullseye, Master Woldillick, Dob crowed. Ha. Good job. Good job, man. That's what you get! Alright, last, the pig children. The Pig Children by Tyston Bane. No one, not the oldest dark elf of Mount Dagoth-Ur, or the ancient sage of solitude himself, can recall a time when the orc did not ravage our fair Tamriel. Whatever foul and pestilent danger of oblivion conjured them up could scarcely have created a more constant threat to the well-being of the civilized races of Tamriel than the obnoxious orc. Orcs are thankfully easy to recognize from other humanoids by their size, commonly 40 partans in height and 15,000 angrades in weight. Their brutal pig-like features and their stench. They are consistently belligerent, morally grotesque, intellectually moronic, and unclean. By all rights, the civilized races of Tamriel should have been able to purge the land of their blight eras ago, but their ferocity, animal cunning, and curious tribal loyalty have made them inevitable as leeches in stagnant pools. Tales of orcish barbarity precede written record. When Jastiaga wrote of the order of Diagna's joining the armies of Daggerfall and Sentinel to hold at bay the wicked orcs in their foul Orsinium fastness, and burn aught in cleansing fire. In First Era 950, she assumed that any reader would be aware of the savagery of the orcs. When the siege was completed 30 years later, the death of many heroes, including Gaden Sinji, and the destruction of Orsinium scattered the orcish survivors throughout the Hrothgarian mountains. She further wrote, "The free peoples rejoice for that their ancient fell enemy was dispersed into diverse parts. Obviously, the orcs have been terrorizing the region of Iliac Bay at least since the early days of the First Era." Quick one. Alright. That's my time at. Well, that's gonna be it for now. That was a nice little bedtime stories before we get to the Dark Brotherhood. But that's gonna have to be for next time. Yes, I'm very excited to do that one. I can't wait. I get to be with my dark brothers and sisters. Woo! Alrighty. Anywho, that's gonna be for next time. Hope you like my reading. And, yeah. Catch y'all later. Ciao, ciao.